Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Crash Bandicoot. In the last part, we continued on the third island, getting a few more gems and levels done in the process, and now we're in Castle Machinery, which, if you have the green gem, is the shortest level in the game. Come up here, you get 27 extra lives, and you're done. However, obviously doing this kind of skips every box in the level. So, yeah, we still have to go back and go through the level proper and get those. Notable, though, something I'm very saddened by, in the N.Sane trilogy, they put the relic clock down this pit, so you actually have to go the normal way around instead of taking that shortcut. Castle Machinery, though, is basically just the first level from the third island theme again, nothing too different. They do a bit more with the platforming, though. That's the major difference, really. If I recall, though, in the prototype, this level doesn't exist. I think this was actually one of the last levels designed for the game. Which, I guess is fun little trivia, but it's probably the most interesting thing about this level, honestly. They do a good amount more with the conveyor belts in this level compared to the other one, as well as the pipes, but otherwise, the platforming here is pretty standard from what we've seen, aside from this section, which can be kind of tricky due to depth perception, because we obviously have to avoid the heated pipes. However, these jumps, while not tight, can be kind of specific if you're bad at timing. And don't even get me started on these last two, where you just have to walk onto a platform. It's a lot tighter than it actually looks. Which, now that I think about it, might be the best way to describe Crash 1. Doable, but very tight. Mostly, again, due to how Crash controls. He's very playable, but precision platforming is not his specialty at all. I think more so with the weight of his controls. Yet again, he is very heavy. Ow. Oh, well. Whoa, what? Camera. Okay then, that was weird. I think that's actually partially consistent, too. It's also around this point in the game where I think they start getting a bit, not lazy, but uncreative with box layouts like this. Because you can tell they wanted this place to have 24 boxes, which is the amount in this level, but they just couldn't figure out a way to place to put 6 other Wumpa crates like that, so they just put them all in one place. Which, to be fair, all 3 Crash games are guilty of that in some points in their levels, but Crash 1, it feels a bit more apparent. I mean, you can only do so much with a design team of 10 people or so. And they did really well with it, but thank God they expanded in a lot of ways from Crash 2 onwards. And now look at them. And here's probably the most annoying part of the stage, which is also probably the most interesting due to how the boxes are laid out. There are a few ways you can go about getting all these boxes. This is my preferred way to do because it feels a bit more safe. But some people will leave certain parts of the upper layer intact so they can go for the lower level on a second run through going backwards. Basically, they'll save the entire row of boxes in 3 trips, which I'm not a fan of doing if it doesn't feel as safe. Though you know what's something I actually have to give Crash 1 that I really like compared to its sequels? Graphically speaking, while 2 and 3 are a lot smoother, Crash 1 has this sort of grain to its textures, when they have textures at least, that always just looked interesting to me. I can't exactly put it into words exactly, but something about it just always looked interesting to me. Either way, that's our 22nd gem, and we're actually also coming up on the last normal level, because as you can tell by the save screen if you're playing along, there are 32 normal levels. Counting the boss fights, Castle Machinery here is the 28th. So now we're heading into the 29th with the next boss, N.Brio, who is Cortex's second in command, sort of. He's the healthiest boss in the game by far, though. First phase, he throws out 2 different beakers. Pink ones which just explode and damage you, and green ones that explode into slime. You need to jump on the slime in order to damage that, thus reducing his health. In the N.Sane trilogy, they changed this fight slightly graphically, at least, by making the slimes actually have faces for some reason, thus making it a bit more obvious that they are enemies you can jump on. Plus, when you jump on them or damage them, they'll fly into Brio, damaging him. Once he's down to his last 3 health, he'll throw one last volley of pink vials, and enter his final phase where he hulks out. At this point, he's going to just start charging you. Jump on the blocks that drop and jump on his head. In the N.Sane trilogy, these jumps are made a bit more specific because you actually have to aim for his head directly, but here you just have to jump in his direction, more or less. And with that, we're on to the final normal level in the game, the lab, which is one a lot of people have trouble with that I have honestly never had too many issues with. Obviously, there's still the no death rule, so if I die, I have to start over. But the big issue that people have in terms of dodging a specific enemy in this stage, I never have, mostly because I don't try to kill said enemy. More on that in a moment. Now, we're coming up on something kind of dickish, though. Also, the blobs work the same way they did in the Brio fight. In this room, there's 8 crates. Beneath the first 4, there's a switch block that will actually open the doors. They're also the only exclamation crates that don't break. Under the second one, there's TNT, so you probably think there's going to be a switch under there, spin into it, and then get blown up. Which, yeah, that's nice. Thanks, game. Thanks a lot. And now we're in the final Tana stage, rather. Which, if you're going for all the boxes, is one of the most annoying, because, as you notice, I just broke a arrow block pointing up above the previous one I was just on. There is a box above that arrow block that you need to get, and that's actually pretty annoying to get, especially in the N.Sane trilogy, where you have to get it for the box gem here. Okay, this lab assistant is the enemy a lot of people have issues with. A lot of people try to kill him by waiting for his hitbox to go away and just trying to spin into them, but if you can just jump around him. I've always just jumped around him. I never really found issues with fighting those guys in particular. Honestly, the bigger annoyance for the lab for me, in terms of pure just going forward, is a little switch area coming up with one of the fall-away floors. I think the doors can also crush you, so watch out for that. The lab is still one of the more annoying levels in the N.Sane trilogy because this is also our last colored gem level, meaning you also can't die in the remake. However, I still had very few issues with it. In fact, I found it a bit easier due to the better control, and I will defend the control changes to N.Sane trilogy in Crash 1's case. This is the one platforming section I have issues with because I can never fully judge this timing. Plus, I think you actually do have to jump around it in order to survive. Also, if you're wondering what that glow transition was there, I got interrupted while recording, so I had to pause and unpause. And that's the lab, which also contains our 23rd gem, which is the yellow gem. So with that, you know what that means? It's time for us to do some backtracking and revisit some prior stages. The yellow gem, though, is a very interesting one, but I'll get into why when we do the second level that requires it. Because first off, we need to head all the way back to the first island. I know I said like a part or two ago that we were done the first island, but I honestly forgot about this. The yellow gem is used back in the Great Gate, our last level we've yet to get everything from in Island 1. My reason for forgetting this is just plain stupidity, I'll be completely honest. Yet again, though, I do find it interesting how most of the colored gem paths are on Island 1, yet most of the colored gems are on Island 3. Yet again, I find that design choice interesting, but also not mean, but not my kind of thing, you know? As I've stated before, I would much rather have it that they intersperse the gems and gem paths throughout the game as much as possible, just so it feels like a better sense of progression. Because I'm having to leave behind a lot of gems early on in the game just feels not discouraging, but off. And here we are. However, this colored gem is interesting in that once we cross that bridge, we're not done the level. There's not like a very short pathway ahead of us. We're only about 2/3 of the way through the level now. The Great Gate is a much bigger level than the original exit would lead on. And now that's a design choice I actually kind of like. Don't leave the entire level not unfinishable, viewable on your first visit. In the case where you do have to revisit stages, that is. Because whether or not I like revisiting stages in games depends on the genre, honestly. If it's something like Mega Man, particularly Mega Man X, fine. If it's something like classic Mega Man or Mario, Only do it for alternate exits, please. RPGs, well, RPGs don't really have levels now, do they? Aside from some action RPGs. And I guess chapter-based RPGs as well, like Final Fantasy 13. And we can go behind the stage here, however, I screwed up in doing this slightly. The way you actually want to do this, spin the arrow block I jumped on to get over here, then jump on the other block to get onto the shortcut so you can come back here and not have to backtrack like I am now. This is purely to save yourself some time because honestly, not the third tier, but the highest level of the Great Gate is actually very hard. A lot of timing, too, which, again, that is one of Crash 1's bigger level design philosophies, is that it's very stop and go, which, whether or not you like that, is very much up to you. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I'll play with it if I have to. You know what I mean? That might also just be due to the fact that my platformer preference technically is run and gun like Contra and Mega Man, so yeah, that's actually probably it. You know, it's kind of interesting, though, because as I've obviously gone over, this is the Crash game I have the most experience with in terms of the times I played it and the age I played it at. However, just because of the way the game itself is structured, there's not much to talk about at some points. Because Crash 1, especially compared to its sequels, is a very rudimentary 3D platformer. Not that that's bad, because Mario 64 is also a rudimentary platformer, and even though that game hasn't aged the most gracefully either, people still love it. Be it due to nostalgia or otherwise. And with that, though, that is our 24th gem. We now need to go to the second yellow gem level and get the one from there. And as for where that is, we need to head all the way back to Lights Out on the third island. But also with that, we are now completely done on the first island. Unlike what I said earlier, now we actually are. Boulder Dash we still have to get a gem from, but we can't get that until we get the next gem, because we have one color gem left to get, and it is in Lights Out. Also notable, Crash 1 is the only Crash game with 6 color gems. All the sequels only have 5. And in terms of getting the gem here, it's honestly not too bad. The yellow gem path is a good distance in, yes, but it's also probably one of the easiest gem paths in the game in terms of what's actually in it. More on what that means in a moment. Because a lot of the other gem paths, there's still a threat of death. Not so much here, because... Whoop, going up. And there's the exit. The entire reason we need to come up here is to get these last 3 boxes. Which, you know, I do like that gem paths transition, but it makes you wonder what's the point of it. And the interesting thing about the yellow gem as well is that I think in the entire series, at least the PlayStation trilogy, I forget about Wrath of Cortex onwards, is that I think yellow gem is the only color gem in the series that's needed to get another color gem, the purple gem. And I've mentioned where we need to use that before. The one that we don't have a gem in is back on level 3. We need to head, Island 2, there we go. We need to head back into Boulder Dash. And we need to basically finish the entire level to use the path. Because if you recall, the color gem was next to the exit. So we have a bit of a distance to go, but thankfully we've been through much worse at this point. Boulder Dash isn't much of a threat anymore. Crash is one of those games where... if you're playing through the game in 1 to 2 sittings, the early levels become very trivial by the time you're at Endgame. Mostly just due to the fact you've seen a lot worse. Which, in my eyes, that is the way it should be in a platformer, Mega Man aside, because they need to kind of balance out bosses and stage difficulties for the kind of open-ended level design for that, which, whether or not people like that is up to them. And there's the purple gem, which takes us down here. Nice little detail I like. You can see the little pillars that we were jumping on that fell down here. And I love the way this area looks. Honestly, I love this green light effect. The N.Sane trilogy made this effect really bluer instead of green. It's also down here. We have some unique textured plant enemies. They're white and blue, and I really like the way they look. There is a threat of death down here, but honestly, you've been through worse at this point. This is our 26th gem, all ours. Notable though, the moment you get the 26th gem, second key, or whatever, you're technically, I think, immediately jumped up to 100%, even saying that that you've cleared 32 out of 32 levels, when at this point we've only cleared 30 out of 32. Which is odd, so now the map is technically fully activated, but we still have 2 levels to go through. And just to show you, yes, this is a 100% save file now. Feels good. Now, originally, the part was going to end here. In fact, I even ended the part. However, after I rendered the video, I went and ended the finale, and it was 7 minutes long. So, guess what's the finale now? I apologize if I mentioned next part earlier this part, but, oh well. Either way, now we're heading to our second to last level, the Great Hall, and that's the shortest level I've ever seen in my life. This level we'll be coming back to after the final boss, because the second ending is accessed through that. Time for our final boss, Dr. N.Cortex.
Darn you, Crash Bandicoot.
He is the most talkative character in this game, and Cortex is a very simple boss fight. He fires 3 kinds of projectiles: purples, which fire directly at you, blues, which wave across the screen in a couple different patterns, be they straight or full-out wavy, and green. You need to spin into the greens to damage him. Sometimes you'll fire multiple in a row, and you need to stack them on top of each other. 5 cycles of this, or is it 6, is all it is. Once you start getting to the last phase is when they start getting tricky, because now we start getting the wavy patterns. And usually I'm good with judging these kind of patterns, but here in Crash 1 they're a bit iffy due to the hitboxes not being the most consistent thing. That, and I'm good with wavy patterns when they're slow, when they're fast rather. When they start getting slow, for some reason I have trouble judging them. The last hit's also the most straightforward, because he basically fires directly at you. And that's it. Also, why is the island on fire? And that's Crash Bandicoot's normal ending. This is technically considered the canon ending due to Crash 2, but that's that. Kind of abrupt, all things considered, honestly, because there's no real build-up to the final boss except for it being the final boss. Crash 1, and I'll get into this again during the second credit sequence, because each of the 2 endings has its own credit sequence, is a good game again, but it's very much the Sonic one, the Mario one, the Spyro one, the first game syndrome, you know, where it's not bad, but it has a lot of issues. If I'm going to recommend a port of this game, well, obviously there's only really the PlayStation Network and the PlayStation ports, aside from the remake, but I recommend the remake due to a lot of minor story things, and overall just smoother experiences, be it due to the fact you can actually die in the non-colored gem levels, and just general fun factor to it, because the control issues were fixed too. Crash 2 onwards are much more interesting games, and, well, of course that's why Crash 2 is next, because I'm doing the trilogy in order. However, I'm not going back to Crash for a bit. I already have the next game recorded, and I'm working on another thing in my spare time as it is. So, you'll see what happens when we get to it. And now I need to figure out what to talk about over the second credit sequence. Joy. In terms of where we're going to go for the second ending, we need to head back to the world map. This is easier to do if you have a save file, obviously, but I'm just going to go back in, and we need to head back into the Great Hall, because as you may have noticed, there's a clear gem here. The more clear gems of the 20 of them that you get in the game, the more that get added to this area. You need all 20 of them in order to access the secondary ending. Otherwise, well, you're just not going to make it all the way through. And fun little graphical quirk coming up. Tana has a blue skirt for the most part, but coming up, we're going to see a green skirt on her, and then it's immediately going to be a blue skirt again, which is, it's just a developer oversight. Papu sold the ruins of a castle Cortex to a resort developer. He then used the proceeds to open a big and tall shop on the island. Yeah, we get a weird "where are they now" sequence here at the end of Crash 1, which, given later games, is kind of weird, but oh well. After intense therapy and 8 years of higher education, Dr. Wu went on to write a well-received book, Through the Eye of the Vortex, a study of rapid evolution and its consequences. Some of these aren't even considered canon anymore thanks to games like Crash Team Racing. Koala Kong moved to Hollywood and landed a motion picture deal with Universal Proportions. Currently, he's working with a speech therapist to improve his diction. Also, I'd like to know, this is just on the background for the save screen, which, Pinstripe moved to Chicago, where he now owns and operates a citywide sanitation company. He's saving money for his upcoming gubernatorial campaign. After the disappearance of his mentor, Dr. N.Brio rediscovered his first love, tending bar. Just imagining him as a bartender, and it's weird, like wearing the generic suit you see all the fancy bartenders wear and such. And finally, the world has heard nothing more of Cortex since Crash foiled his plans, but evil geniuses are harder to squash than cockroaches. Yeah, the sequels go on to prove that. Ugh. And yeah, that's all the second ending is. It's a "where are they now" sequence partnered with this almost desktop background worthy image, because this is a really cool image. They added a bit more character to this in the N.Sane trilogy, where Crash falls off the bird, sort of. And by that I mean he's hanging around his legs from the bottom. But yeah, Crash 1, as I said, okay game. Not really worth going back to aside from the N.Sane trilogy version. But it's still there, and if you're a fan of Crash, I'd recommend going back to it. Overall, I would recommend starting with Crash 2 or 3, though. Purely due to better everything, really. And that is kind of a case with a lot of sequels. I don't see many people recommend people start with Sonic 1 anymore. Most people recommend starting with Sonic 2 or 3. Same with Mario, same with Spyro, same with a lot of series. And that's just the way it is, because the first games in the series are where they try to get a basic idea of what they want to do, but if they get a sequel, they want to refine it and just make it better. In most instances, of course. Some sequels end up being worse, but that's neither here nor there at the moment, because I'm not talking about those kind of sequels. And that's about all I have to say for Crash 1. Thank you guys for watching, have a great night, take care, and I'll see you guys next Let's Play, whatever that may be. See you guys then.